September 15th, 2008, the world was shocked by the collapse of Lehman Brothers. The global stock markets went into a freefall and the US economy entered a recession. But in Japan, a seismic shift was quietly taking shape. As the old order fell, a new power began to rise. In this chaos, one man secretly started to conquer the stock market. While legendary traders like BNF lost nearly half of their fortunes in the chaos, this mysterious trader was among the few who not only survived but thrived. At the time, nobody knew who he was, but soon enough, he would go on to dominate Japan's trading scene in ways no one could have predicted. He calls himself Testa. Starting with just $20,000 in 2005, Testa would go on to carve out a legacy as Japan's undisputed day trading legend, conquering the stock market for the last 25 years. A young boy stepped into his mother's bedroom, his hands holding a small birdcage. It was a simple distraction, something to take his mind off the looming final exams that filled his middle school days with stress. He stared at the tiny creature as it tried to spread its wings. It needed a name. He thought for a moment, his mind drifting naturally to the thing consuming his thoughts the most, his upcoming tests. And just like that, the name Testa was born. But, as life often reminds us, nothing is permanent. Not long after, the little bird passed away. The bird was gone, but the name stayed. Testa would eventually become something much more than the boy could have ever imagined. Like many Japanese kids in the 1990s, Testa loved video games. In Japan, gaming wasn't just a pastime, it was a culture. Even trading legends like Sizz and BNF had similar beginnings, cutting their teeth in gaming before entering the trading world. For hours on end, Testa would immerse himself in the virtual worlds of his favorite titles. Among all the games, one held his attention more than any other: Street Fighter 2. For him, it wasn't just a game, it was a battlefield. He didn't like the idea of someone beating him. Losing wasn't an option. Testa approached video games like a strategist at war. He began studying the game, analyzing his opponents, recognizing patterns, and trying to predict their next move. It was as if he was sharpening his sword against a whetstone, preparing for every battle with a sharp mind. Soon, the hours of intense gaming began to pay off. Testa was no longer the underdog. After that, he became unbeatable. For Testa, those gaming days weren't just about fun. They were the proving grounds for the skills that would one day shape his trading empire. As high school was about to end, Testa found himself at a crossroads. The future loomed large, filled with decisions that started to haunt him. Unlike his classmates, clear paths didn't appeal to him. He had grown up watching his parents lead structured lives as civil servants. To him, their days seemed scripted, predictable to a fault. The very thought of such a life filled him with dread. Testa knew deep down he wasn't cut out for the regular 9-to-5. After graduation, he dabbled in various part-time jobs, never settling. Each paycheck, however modest, was carefully saved, not spent on reckless pleasures, but deposited straight into his bank account. Eventually, his frugality paid off. His savings allowed him to start a small business. Using a team of part-time workers, he scaled up operations. Still, living frugally, investing every yen back into his savings account. For a guy his age, Testa was doing good, but deep down, he knew this was not his calling. The business, thriving as it was, felt like another dead end. A different version of the life he had vowed to avoid. One day, Testa got a call from his bank that changed everything. The people at the bank had noticed how much money he was saving. They wanted to talk to him about it. A bank employee suggested he should invest his savings in something called an investment trust. Testa didn't know what was that. Back then, he couldn't just look up everything online. Curious about this foreign term, Testa made his way to a local bookstore, looking to uncover what an investment trust meant. But instead, he found himself drawn to the broader world of the stock market. Testa had always thought the stock market was just for professional gamblers, people who knew how to play the game. But among the pages, he discovered the concept of day trading, a way for individuals to earn a full-time income from trading short-term in the market. This was his light bulb moment. He thought, if someone who was an ordinary office worker is making a stable income, maybe I can do it too. This idea stuck with him. With newfound determination, Testa started saving every penny for his new upcoming challenge. Each deposit he made was a step closer to the new world he was about to enter. But one big question hung in the air. Could a newbie trader like him really make it on the stock market? Testa had one simple goal. Before stepping into the world of the stock market, he needed 3 million yen, the equivalent of $20,000. This was his ticket to a new life. He believed it was enough to start with, enough to make the leap. But there was a problem. He was an outsider, a complete beginner. No mentor, no degree, no experience. The world of the stock market was a dark maze he knew nothing about. Back then, the internet was still a jungle, and YouTube, it was barely a startup. For some time, Testa didn't know where to start. But one day, something changed. Like a lost man stranded on a deserted island, Testa stumbled upon a treasure he didn't expect to find. Blog posts. Back then, every successful trader had one. After the market closed, they would retreat to their screens and pour their thoughts into personal blogs, sharing the stories behind their trades, the wins, the losses, and the strategies that worked. And Testa, he devoured them. For months, Testa buried himself in these blog posts every single day. He absorbed everything, every strategy, every mistake, every victory. The more he read, the more the pieces started to fall into place. The same pattern recognition skills he had used to master Street Fighter 2 were now being applied to something else. Not a game though, but a way to make money. But why day trading? Testa was cautious. He wasn't ready to risk everything. He knew there was still much he didn't understand about the market. His strategy, therefore, was straightforward. Stay active as long as the market was open, making multiple entries and exits throughout the trading day. No overnight positions. He chose scalping as his preferred style within the day trading world. This method focused on making quick and small profits. Get in, scalp a small win, and get out, repeatedly cycling through positions only during market hours to minimize exposure and reduce risk. He felt ready. His knowledge was now sufficient. The small bird was ready to spread its wings. With 3 million yen in his account, he decided that now was the time. At just 19 years old, Testa started day trading on the stock market. He thought he was prepared. He thought he had what it took. But then, reality hits. At the end of his first month in the market, Testa was down 300,000 yen. He had followed the steps, he had used the strategies, but nothing worked. His losses kept piling up. The winners were few and far between. The weight of that 300,000 loss crushed him. It didn't just affect his account. It affected his body. Waking up in the mornings, throwing up, it was a routine. No matter how little he ate, it didn't matter. The pressure, the stress, it was always there. Life felt dark. He didn't expect it to be like that. He had thought that with hard work, the wins would come. But right now, it was nothing but losses. But he wasn't ready to quit. Not yet. He swallowed his pride. He pushed through the pain and made it to the second month. He had no choice. He had already invested everything. His time, his energy, his money. He had to keep going. The second month passed by. Testa was still trading in the market. He kept losing, but this time the losses were smaller. The second month cost him 100,000 yen, not the breakthrough he had imagined, but still progress. His losses were getting smaller, replaced by a few winning trades. For the first time, Testa felt like the pieces were starting to fall into place. He wasn't making a fortune yet, but he was getting closer. He could feel it. He was moving in the right direction. By the end of the third month, something finally clicked. Testa made his first profit. It wasn't much, wasn't even enough to cover his monthly expenses, but still, it was a victory. As Testa refined his approach, he began cutting off his losses as early as possible, moving on quickly from trades that weren't working. This strategy enabled him to make more profitable bets rather than getting stuck with losing ones. He found that trading on a 3-minute chart was the optimum style for him. He would often enter the market 30 minutes after the opening time. It gave him some time to study how the stock was about to behave that day. Testa's major breakthrough came with an epiphany. Stocks were like people, each with their distinct personalities. This realization transformed his trading strategy. He understood that to truly succeed, he needed to get to know each stock individually, to study their unique behaviors, price ranges, and movements intimately. By dedicating himself to understanding just one stock at a time, he could predict its next moves, effectively positioning himself 2 steps ahead of the market. So Testa committed to trading a single stock, sticking with it for days on end, as long as it continued to be profitable. He wasn't always right, no trader is, but perfection wasn't his goal. Success for Testa meant winning more often than losing. As long as 60% of his trades were profitable and his account's net balance grew, he was on the right track. This approach didn't just work, it revolutionized his perspective on trading, turning what he originally saw as a risky gamble into a calculated and strategic game where he held the winning hand. It reminded him of his childhood days when he used to spend hours studying his friends playing against him in Street Fighter 2. But right now, his opponent was the stock market, and he was trying to beat it. The clarity in his mind was starting to come back. The small wins were adding up, and slowly he felt he was beginning to understand the rhythm of the market. But something started creeping at the back of his mind. The gains were good, but the massive profits he once dreamed about, the ones that would make him a fortune, those still seemed far away. He began to doubt if day trading was as he expected expected it to be. Then, December 2005 happened. The world woke up to the Jcom scandal. An inexperienced trader at a Japanese bank made a huge mistake. He was supposed to sell one share of Jcom stock for 640,000 yen, but he accidentally listed 640,000 shares for just 1 yen each. One trader spotted the error, a man who was quick and bold. BNF acted without hesitation. He saw the mistake and he acted fast. Using half his account size, he brought as many shares as he could. It was risky, but it paid off, big time. From one single trade, BNF made a total profit of 2 billion yen. The Jcom incident sent shockwaves through the entire stock market. The potential of day trading was now clear to everyone, and for Testa, it shattered the beliefs he had about what was possible. He began to see the true power of day trading. The Jcom incident didn't just inspire him, it transformed his mindset. He realized that there was more to this game than he had ever imagined. He was no longer just playing for survival, now he was playing to win. The grind continued, the small wins turned into bigger ones, and Testa's confidence grew. By the end of 2006, he had made a total profit of 6 million yen. In 2007, that number grew to 17 million yen. 3 years of frustration, failure, and learning had led him here. Testa finally understood the market. He was no longer guessing. He knew what he was doing. As the new year was approaching, Testa was more ready than ever. New dreams began to take shape in his mind. He could feel it. His mind was entering the flow state. The future suddenly started to feel within reach. But what Testa didn't know was that the upcoming year was about to make a major shift across the globe that no one could have predicted. September 15th, 2008, the fall of Lehman Brothers sent shockwaves through the global economy, triggering the Great Recession. Lehman Brothers, a 150-year-old financial giant, collapsed due to toxic mortgage assets. Despite being oceans away, its fall devastated Japan's Tokyo stock market, hitting the country hard. 20 years ago, Japan's economy was isolated, so global crisis didn't impact it as much. But as Japan's stock market became more integrated with global financial systems, it was no longer immune to such a massive crisis. And then the rumors started. The day trading legend BNF had lost millions in the crash. The man who had made billions from a single trade had been blindsided. A wave of disappointment washed over the day trading community in Japan. If even BNF couldn't survive the storm, how could they? For Testa, this was his first real taste of economic chaos. The odds were against him. Testa knew this was the moment that would define him. He had to survive this storm, or he would never get another chance. The world was watching. He had nothing to lose, but everything to gain. And somehow, he made it. He weathered the storm. Testa kept his emotions in check. He didn't let fear rule him. Instead, he relied on a set of trading strategies he had meticulously developed, strategies that kept him alive in the market. His rule: never hold a position overnight, no matter the circumstances, no matter how tempting it is. This exposed him to risks, but he believed it was the best way to minimize losses in such uncertain times. Testa had learned how significant the law of large numbers is. The stock market was chaotic, but he could still win. The key was to place more winning trades than losing ones, no matter how many losses came along the way. While other traders bled out, holding onto long positions and praying for the market to turn around, Testa was playing a different game. He wasn't just surviving, he was thriving. 2008 was a turning point. Testa walked away with a staggering 22 million yen in profits. Testa had learned something invaluable. As a day trader, it didn't matter whether the Nikkei was up or down. The only thing that mattered was movement, price volatility. That's where the real money was. While the giants like BNF struggled, Testa was winning, and his reputation was beginning to grow. Testa's journey didn't stop in 2008. He followed up with an even stronger performance in 2009 and 2010, continuing his winning streak and carving a name for himself in the stock market communities. But just as he was gaining confidence in his abilities, just as he was starting to believe he could conquer anything, something no one saw coming was about to hit Japan hard.
An earthquake so strong it literally shifted the Earth's axis by about 25 centimeters.
March 11, 2011, the world woke up to the devastating news. The Great East Japan earthquake struck, measuring 9.0 on the Richter scale. This sent shockwaves across the nation, and the effects were felt around the world. As the earth rumbled, so did the stock market. The Nikkei plunged. In just days, it lost more than 15%. The very foundation of Japan's economy seemed to crumble. Traders everywhere were losing their positions, losing their faith in the market itself. Stocks across every sector were hit hard, and the economy seemed to spiral into a deep crisis. Testa knew the rules. He had survived the Lehman shock. He had seen the market crash before and learned to survive it. But this was different. He knew this was the moment that could make or break him. As the tremors of the disaster spread, Testa found himself facing the greatest challenge of his career. The lessons he had learned during the Lehman shock were now being tested. Only this time, he wasn't a small-time player anymore. His capital had grown a lot. Now, the stakes were higher. If he makes the wrong move, it could be the end of his career. But Testa didn't panic. He didn't fold. He remembered the lessons from his past, strategies that had helped him weather storms before. He doubled down, stuck to his rules, and kept his cool. In the chaos, he found clarity. December 31, 2011. Testa stood tall with a smile on his face. This was his day. 2011 had been a bloody year, a year that had tested every trader in the Japanese stock market. The markets were volatile and unforgiving. Economic turmoil, natural disasters, and global instability had left even the most seasoned traders bleeding losses. For everyone, it was the year of survival. But for Testa, it was something else. He had finally done it. He had joined the 100 million yen club. Few traders ever reached this far, but Testa, he proved that he wasn't like the others. He was a different breed. But as the fireworks lit up the sky of the New Year's Eve, another thought crept into Testa's mind, a thought that would keep him up at night. The question was simple, yet monumental. Could he double it? The political landscape in Japan was shifting. The elections were set, and the Liberal Democratic Party was starting to regain its foothold. The country was about to witness a change, and at the center of it all stood one man, Shinzo Abe. Abe's vision for Japan, known as Abenomics, was beginning to take shape. His policies promised to revive the economy, kickstart growth, and restore confidence in Japan. The market was already buzzing with the promise of something big, a mix of fiscal stimulus, monetary easing, and structural reforms. Together, they were primed to spark a bull market in Japan. Testa watched intently, his years of experience giving him a clear picture of what was coming. He wasn't just watching a politician rise to power, he was watching the market's next major wave begin to build. Testa saw a bull market approaching. Testa had always trusted fast trades and short-term profits, but the bull market demanded a shift to long-term positions, which made him uncomfortable. The decision between sticking to his familiar strategy or embracing the long-term approach weighed heavily on his mind. December 26, 2012. Shinzo Abe won the election. The stage was set, and Testa knew that the time had come. The bull market was here. It was time to pick a side, to choose how he would play the game. And with that, he made his decision. In 2013, Testa made a bold move. He entered the year with one goal, to double his greatest achievement, 100 million yen. Over the next year, his strategy began to unfold, and with it, the profits came. More than 70% of his profits came from long-term positions, while only 30% came from day trading. It was a complete shift from his usual style, but it worked. By the end of 2013, Testa had made a net profit of 500 million yen. In just 1 year, he had multiplied his net profit by 5 times. 2013 was a staggering success, one of the most profitable years of his career. His leap into the bull market had paid off in ways he didn't imagine could happen. His name began to spread through the ranks of traders. From the small forums to the big brokerage houses, Testa's status soared. He wasn't just another trader grinding away, he was a master of the game. His winning streaks continued for the following 2 years. Of course, he didn't make the same 500 million yen he took in 2013. This year was an anomaly, but still, he was the big shot day trader everybody was talking about. Looking back at what he had achieved so far, Testa truly believed that the world was his for the taking. Little did he know, the first week of the upcoming year would carry a great hit to his face, a hit that he considered as the darkest moment of his entire career. 7th of Jan, 2016. Testa was sitting in his home office when he had just finished a bloody trading session. This week was like hell. Testa never saw it coming. He had started the year believing he could conquer anything the market threw at him, but the market had other plans. In just few days, Testa was hit with a staggering 100 million yen loss, a loss so severe it shook him to his core. He couldn't believe what was happening. His mind raced, his body drained. The man who had once mastered the market now felt like a ship lost in a storm. He had been one of the few legends known in the Japanese trading communities. Last year, he had made a profit of 170 million yen, yet here he was, in a single week. He had lost nearly 60% of that. It wasn't supposed to be like that. The trades he was planning to profit from were suddenly losing. His account was bleeding money, loss after loss. It was as if the market itself had turned against him. He was losing more than he could handle, and it wasn't just his wallet that was suffering. The recent losses took a toll on his health too. He was so stressed that he started to find blood in his urine. The weight of it all began to break him down. Every trader eventually reaches a point where their instincts stop working, where their edge dulls, and they face the inevitable retirement. Maybe it was his time, but Testa wasn't ready to give up. Not yet. He still felt like he was just getting started. There was still so much gas left in the tank. But what could he do? His instincts were failing him. He was lost. But then, just when the darkness felt like it was swallowing him whole, a memory surged from the depth of his mind. A childhood memory. Getting crushed by his friends. He hated losing. But then came the comeback. Hours spent mastering the game, studying every move, learning every weakness. His friends began to fear him. He became unstoppable. Then, as if triggered by this memory, his mind began to play a fast movie reel of his trading career. It seemed to point him toward a path, a reminder of his resilience. He recalled the early days of day trading. Now, he had calmly navigated through the initial losses. He remembered standing firm during catastrophic market events like the Lehman Shock and the Great East Japan earthquake. While others were merely surviving, Testa was thriving, and with that, the realization struck him. This was the moment. He couldn't give up. Not now. Not ever. Not after everything he had been through. Testa closed his eyes and took a deep breath. He had lost, yes, but this wasn't the end. He had faced worse before, and he would come back stronger. He could do it again. He dove into his losses and analyzed every single trade. What went wrong? What could he learn? It wasn't just the trades. It was his ego, the bruising, the emotional toll. It had clouded his judgment. The lesson was clear. He needed to get back to basics. He needed to minimize the risk, to grind his way back. Testa went all in. He redefined his strategy and doubled down on the one principle he knew worked: the law of large numbers. No more emotional trades, just pure logic and raw focus. He locked himself in, blocking out the world, skipping breakfast, skipping lunch. For hours, he sat glued to the screen, trading, analyzing, and rethinking every move. His mind became a machine, and as the months passed by, the losses began to shrink. Slowly but surely, Testa was clawing his way back. Then June came, and with it, a moment of triumph. For months, his account was in the negative, but now it was back to zero. He could have never thought that having a zero balance would make him happy. Yet here he was. His losses were erased. He felt relieved for a while. But that moment wasn't just a victory, it was a crossroad. Testa had two choices. He could ease off the gas and take a break, or he could test his limits and see how far he could push himself. And he chose the latter. He revved up the engine and pushed his strategy even harder. For the next 6 months, he pushed himself further than ever. He replicated the same strategy he used. No emotions, no BS trades, just trading with his old tested principles. By the end of 2016, Testa had turned his fortunes around. Starting the year with a massive 100 million yen loss, he finished with a net profit of 260 million yen. In just 6 months, he had proven his true potential. If he had stuck to this strategy for the whole year, he could have easily earned $500 million from day trading alone. But as he looked back on everything he had achieved, something became clear. All this time, Testa hadn't been competing against the market. He wasn't battling other traders. He wasn't even fighting the systems or the trends. No, he had been fighting his former self, who doubted, who almost gave up. But now, with his assets crossing nearing the billion-yen mark, Testa was facing a new problem, a problem he never thought he would have to deal with. As the calendar flipped to 2017, Testa found himself at a crossroads. His wealth had grown exponentially, and with it, the complexity of his trading challenges. The tactics that once made him a legendary day trader were no longer effective with his expanded account size. Testa knew it was time for a change. Day trading, the very strategy that had built his fortune, was becoming a bottleneck. The realization hit him hard. His trading style had to evolve. He needed to shift to long-term investing. In his day trading days, Testa steered clear of major company stocks. Their price movements were too stable, offering little profit potential for his aggressive strategies. On the flip side, the stocks of very small companies were also problematic due to their low trading volumes. Getting stuck in a position without a buyer was a risk he couldn't afford. The sweet spot he found was in mid-sized companies with large price fluctuations and healthy trading volumes. Stocks that provided shiny opportunities for profit without the risks of low liquidity. However, he faced a hard reality. As his account size swelled, the opportunities available to him shrunk. The more he thought about it, the clearer it became. Day trading was no longer a viable strategy for him. Testa began diversifying his long-term investments, expanding into US stocks alongside his Japanese holdings. He meticulously built a portfolio of 15 long-term stocks, collecting 42 Japanese and 8 leading American stocks, including well-known household names. He targeted stocks with a dividend rate of around 5%, even if a stock performed well, and offered a dividend rate of just 4%. Testa saw the value, given its market performance. By collecting annual dividends combined with capital gains, Testa set his sight on a 10% annual yield from his long-term investments. For Testa, this was a new chapter, one that promised steady, reliable growth rather than the volatile swings of day trading. After that, Testa had an interesting realization. He learned that just by holding the shares, he could earn over $1 billion in dividends every year. Testa had transformed from a day trader into a long-term tactical investor. For the past 25 years, Testa's net profits have surpassed 10 billion yen, more than $66 million. But despite his extraordinary success, he wasn't flashy with his wealth. Apart from his expensive rented apartment, his life was modest and simple. All his earnings were funneled back into the market. For 25 years, he had dominated the day trading game. To him, trading wasn't just a job, it was a game. Every trade, every strategy was another move on the board, and as long as he kept winning, nothing else seemed to matter. But beneath the numbers, the profits, and the strategies, Testa felt a deep emptiness, a hollow space that couldn't be filled by numbers on a screen. Testa started to realize that he was losing at another game, the game of life. His focus had been so singular, so consumed by the numbers and the trades, that he had neglected the human connections that truly mattered. He had built a fortress around himself, one made of stocks, profits, and cold calculations, but it left him isolated. He wasn't married, there were few friendships, and no family to share his victories with. In a moment of reflection, Testa understood that success in one area of life doesn't guarantee fulfillment in others. The numbers, the traits, they no longer brought him the joy they once had. With his newfound perspective, Testa began to see life through a different lens, a lens focused on giving. He discovered multiple orphanages scattered across Japan in desperate need of help, children with all kinds of backgrounds. Each one was a sanctuary for children who had known pain in ways most could never imagine. Abandoned by their parents, born into abusive homes, or left orphaned by tragedy. Each child had a story, but one thing united them all. They needed help, and he was happy to offer them the one thing he had the most, his money. He started pouring his money into orphanages across Japan, investing in something that could make a real difference. The wealth he had accumulated in the markets could now be used to create human connections, to give others a chance to thrive. He had spent years winning at one game, but now he was ready to play a different one, a game that truly mattered.